Study Bible, put out by Concordia Publishing House. It uses the ESV text, English Standard Version. The English Standard Version, which is the version that our church body is adopting now to our catechism studies, trophy school curriculum, eventually Sunday school, our hymnal course, etc. What's a Lutheran Study Bible? It's a study Bible in which all notes, all commentaries are written by sound Lutheran theologians from our church body and from other trustworthy church bodies, Lutheran church bodies, trustworthy ones, orthodox ones, which eliminates, with all due respect, the ELCA. By the way, we don't say that when they bleed, I guess, but I feel very sorry for members of the ELCA. They are going through some great struggles right now. In fact, one of the fellows who was to accompany me, and I was asked to go to India one more time this coming January, he's an ELCA pastor. There are good pastors of the ELCA. There are a few good congregations of the ELCA who are grieving over what happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. Hope you all know what happened. Heard that on the news. This is incredible. I think it's the only church body, I think, in Christendom that has officially recognized homosexual relationships as being legitimate before God if they are in a committed relationship. Now this is incredible. As I've been telling a few people, if homosexuals can live in a committed relationship without marriage, which of course in Minnesota they can't get married yet, that's a problem in itself, that a church body with its headquarters, it used to be here in Minneapolis, actually okays something that the state says is against the law. Go figure. How can we any longer tell our teenagers, for example, that they can't live together in committed relationships? I mean, hello, it's goose is good for the gander, isn't it? Is that how they do it? Whatever that is. Goose is better than gander is the basket, is that right? What's good for the goose, good for the gander. Worse, that now you can actually, if congregations so decide, you can have homosexual clergy. Your pastor could be a lesbian or homosexual. This is incredible. I mean, what they think is St. Paul says quite clearly, homosexual offenders will not enter the kingdom of God. Now, what's the ELCA thinking when they say St. Paul, when I listen to him? What's he, an apostle? I think that's going to cause tremendous damage to that church body. And I know that this fellow, back to this issue, this fellow is supposed to be in India this year. He backed out because his congregation is going through tremendous trouble, tribulation, strife, trying to decide what to do now. Should they stay members of the ELCA? Do they want to come to the Missouri Synod? The trouble there is that many of these ELCA congregations, while they're pretty good, they have adapted to female clergy, because that goes back quite a number of years. And they know that if they come to the Missouri Synod, they may have to fire the minister, because she will not be legitimate. And they will have to start practicing closed communion, which is not the practice of the ELCA. So I think those congregations are caught between a rock and a hard place as to what they will do. But I do grieve for those congregations. I do hope that we keep them in our prayers. We have already, in this congregation, again, I don't say this with any excitement or happiness necessarily, but we've already received comments from members of the ELCA inquiring about our congregation here. They've had it up to here with what's going on in the ELCA. That's a sad day in that church body. You wonder what those people should do. Should they leave? Should they stay and fight? It's always a difficult decision. Even our own church body can be difficult someday. We stay and fight. At which point you say, I cannot be a member of a church body anymore. It goes against what I personally believe. That differs for every Christian, I suppose, at which point you have to make that kind of confession. So anyway, did you hear too that when that boat came in, the steeple fell over it? Yeah. Tornado blew through right during the boat. And then something happened. Well, that's what happened. Yeah, well, I'm not going to be superstitious about that, but you know, God's good gracious. Okay, chapter 37. What I'd like to take up with you is this great story of Joseph, and it takes up the remainder of the book of Genesis, chapters 37 to what is it, 40? What's the last chapter? I forgot, 40. Help me out here. 44. 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. I should know. 37 through 50 takes up the story of Joseph. It's a major part of the book. And I think as we study the story of Joseph, what is the main issue here in the entire book of Genesis? What you're going to notice the story of Joseph is going to highlight in kind of a clever way. We don't think of the Bible having a sting in it. The book of Job does, certainly. Remember that book? I should teach that one again. Job, you know, he loses everything. And how at the end of the book, you know, he goes and retains his faith in God. And so God gives him back everything he has. And of course, the sting in the book is, oh, if we just have enough faith, everything will turn out okay. What happens when it doesn't? If that's how you think the book caught you, you better go back and read back to the beginning again. That's a sting. That's what happens in this story here, because the big issue in the book of Genesis, indeed throughout the entire Old Testament, the promise is the thing. What promise? The promise is the issue. Beginning back in the book of Genesis chapter 3, what promise? That God would send a Savior. He promises it to Adam and Eve in the garden, as the devil sits there gloating over their fall into sin. And God had threatened Adam and Eve, the day you eat of that tree, you will die. And not just die in Hebrew, tamut mot, you will surely die. Dying, you will die. That's how the Hebrew writes it. Always have a word to read it. It's highly emphatic. Adam and Eve, of course, never having seen death in their lives, don't take it all that seriously. Like people today who have not seen hell yet. We make jokes about it. We don't take it seriously either. We've never been there. One person has been there and come back out again. Who's that? That's right. And he's told us hell is a horrible place. We're going to listen to it. He's been there. There was a man who went to hell himself. We don't know his name. And as he was in the torments of hell, he lifts his eyes up and sees the rich and poor man Lazarus in heaven. And he begged Abraham, send Lazarus back to my brothers and tell them about this horrible place so they don't come here. And what's Abraham's response? Remember? They have Moses and the prophets. They will not listen to Moses and the prophets. They will not listen to one, even though he would rise from the dead. Now, Jesus is telling that story. There is a cloaked reference to what, you suppose? Himself. They will not listen to one, even if he rises from the dead. That's the truth. People won't pay attention to Jesus either. So, as you go through the book of Genesis, as it unfolds, that's always the issue. Through whom will the promised Messiah come? Would it be Eve herself? She gives birth to her first son, and she names him, I got him, Cain, which comes from the word kana, kaniti, or I got it. Actually says kaniti, et Yahweh, I got the Lord. She thinks he's the great Messiah. She learns what quickly that ain't the case. She names her next son Heaven, which means emptiness, depression, which seems to indicate she realizes this may take longer than she suspected. And you know, as you work through the book of Genesis, the puzzle is there. Who will it be? Will it be Noah now? Come through Noah. Noah's descendants. Oh, it must be Shem. Will come through him. Then Abraham. And it keeps unfolding. And now we get to chapter 37. We're wondering, through whom will the promise come? And chapters 37 and following are going to set us up. We always suspect it should be the oldest. The oldest of Jacob's sons. We had a bunch of them, you know. By the way, he had several wives to do it. So I think he had 2 wives and 2 concubines. Shows reminds me of seminary in Springfield. He was about 50 when he came to the seminary. We've heard this story, some of you. He was a farmer from Nebraska, and he came in his coveralls to become a pastor. And first time in class, he was reading about Solomon and his 700 combines. He was a wealthy man. The prophet said, "Oh, that's concubines." I don't know if you knew what that was. You might have wanted 700 of those too. But anyway, he had a bunch of kids. His oldest was Reuben, and we would suspect Reuben would be the one. We'll find out very quickly as we read chapters 37 following. It's not going to be Reuben. We must learn to read the book of Genesis. In fact, the book of Genesis teaches us to look at all history, if I may use a good German word that was misused by liberal theologians years ago, but I think you can